Alrighty, good morning everyone, and welcome to another Swish stream with Steven. I am Steven, my team is Swish. If you appreciate or enjoy the content you receive today, give us a follow on YouTube at Swish Gaming, Twitter The Swish Gaming, Twitch The Swish Gaming, Facebook Swish Gaming, and we also have a website, swishgaming.com. You can check us out there and get more of your magic-related needs fulfilled. Well, today is a very special and exciting day. Today is the day that Crimson Vow is going to be released on MTG Arena. And in my unyielding excitement for the set dropping, I was super hyped and thought it was going to release at 10 a.m. today, because when I was reading about it online, it said that maintenance started at 10 a.m. I didn't pay enough attention. I basically just Googled, hey, what time does Crimson Vow drop? And saw 10 a.m. and was like, yeah, 10 a.m. Can't wait to start playing it at 10 a.m. But that's when the maintenance starts on MTG Arena. So maintenance should be starting any minute here on MTG Arena. It looks like it hasn't quite started yet. But that's when it said it was going to start. But it's going to take a few hours for that maintenance to be complete and for Crimson Vow to actually drop on Arena. As soon as it does, we will get that downloaded and we will start playing some Crimson Vow Limited. But until then, yesterday I was doing a full set review of Crimson Vow and we did not quite finish it. So we're going to continue that to fill in some of the time today. Continue to talk about these Crimson Vow cards, and hopefully by the end of this set review, or even before I'm finished with every card, the set will be released. And if I'm not done with the review, we'll just hop right in anyway. As soon as that set releases, I want to start playing. I'm very excited to play it. It looks really fun. But until then, we are going to just continue this set review. So if you did not tune in yesterday, I am rating every card on a 10-point scale in both limited and constructed for their playability. Basically, 10.0 is unbelievably good. I can't really imagine it being much better. And 0.0 is you should absolutely never play this card. You should be ashamed of yourself if you're sleeving this card up. I didn't give many cards 0.0 yesterday. I've been generous with most of them and given a lot of them a 1.0 because I could see, someone going to their first F&M and playing a card in their deck. But there are even some cards that are below that level, in my opinion, and those are the ones that get a 0.0. So that's kind of how the scale works. But we are going to continue here with the green cards in Crimson Vow. So our first card here is Apprentice Sharpshooter. 2 generic green, human archer, reach, and training, 1/4. So this card's actually pretty sweet. The reason this card's sweet is this is a pretty common template for a card in Limited. A 2 generic 1 green for a 1/4 with reach has been done multiple times before. And most other times I can remember it being done, the card ended up being quite good. But this card is even better than that because it has training tacked onto it. So how this card is going to work a lot of the time, especially if someone is on the play, someone's going to play a 2-drop with at least 2 power, because most of the 2-drops have 2 power, and usually you don't play 2-drops that don't have 2 power. It's very rare that you would play 2-drops without 2 power anyway. But you're going to play a 2-drop with 2 power, and then you're going to play this on turn 3, and then on turn 4, especially if you were on the play, you're going to be able to kind of free attack with that 2-drop and this card. So you're going to kind of be able to take a turn off of being on the defensive with this card. And you're just going to be able to train and make this thing a 3-mana 2/5 reacher, which is absurd. A 2/5 reacher is insanely hard to attack through. Most creatures in this format will not be able to break through that. And so I think this card is actually going to be a pretty top-tier green common. This is going to be a really solid card. There's a Toughness Matters theme, it seems like, in the green-black archetype, which this will work beautifully with. But it's also, this card is just going to be great at not only holding down the ground, but also holding down the air. So that being said, I would give this common here a solid 7.0. This card's very good. It's going to be top tier common. Sometimes you would first pick this. Usually you would not first pick it. Most uncommons will be able to outclass this. Most of the rares will be able to outclass this. But this is a very solid top 5 pick in probably any pack. And I could see this being a very strong player in the limited format. As far as constructed goes, I think I would give this card like a 2.0. It's a human, which is relevant, but for 3 mana, you should probably just be doing something else. I can't really imagine playing this card over a card like, say, Adeline. I was going to say Elite Spellbinder is way better than this card, but this card actually holds down Elite Spellbinder pretty well. So in a heads-up battle, this card almost beats the Elite Spellbinder in a way. But anyway, don't play this in Constructed. Not a card you want to be playing in Constructed, but going to be a very solid limited player in my opinion. On to the next card here, Ascendant Pack Leader. 1 green, Wolf. Ascendant Pack Leader enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Ascendant Pack Leader. If you are able to draft this card pretty early and build a aggressive, say, green-white deck, green-red deck, I don't hate this card at all in Limited, although 1-drops, even though it scales, 1-drops in Limited typically are not, totally dominant. I wouldn't be jumping for joy if I opened this as a rare, but I would be fine taking this card. I definitely think it's a solid card. I think I would give it a 7.5. It's definitely better than the common we just saw. It's not a rare that's going to completely dominate every game, but if you play it on turn 1, it can get some damage in, especially if you're on the play. And if you have a deck with a good amount of 4 CMC things, it'll be able to grow, which is obviously really good. So I'm going to give it a 7.5 in Limited. It's a card that you will first pick sometimes, but you would definitely take some uncommons over this. I don't think I would take this card over, say, like a Hero's Downfall, the red 3 mana, deal 5. There are definitely some uncommons I would take over this rare. But it is still definitely a solid card. And I don't think Limited is where this card is really going to shine. I think this card is going to be nuts in Constructed. This mono green currently has 0 1-drop creatures, just like 0 good 1-drops, and this is exactly what the doctor ordered for the mono green decks in Standard. It could potentially see play in Historic. I don't know if Modern was really in the business for a 1-drop aggressive creature, but I mean, here it is. But I think this is going to be a very key card in Standard because the aggressive decks, especially the green aggressive decks, just don't have good ones. The only playable one that they really have right now is Jaspera Sentinel, and most are not playing that card anyway. The only decks that are playing that card are the decks that also play Magda, and typically those are 3-color piles. They play a little more mid-rangey than aggro sometimes anyway. But this card is going to be really, really sweet to have access to in the mono green decks. I'm not sure what'll get cut for this. I'm not even sure if they will 100% end up playing it. But it's a very good thing to have access to. And I also really like that it is a wolf, so it has the random wolf and werewolf synergies in the format as well. So I'm going to give this card an 8.0 in Constructed. I think this card is just great to have access to. I love it when we have good 1-drops. It's very key for aggressive decks, especially in Standard. So, this is going to be a good one. Keep your eye on this. Would not be surprised if this slots itself right into the mono green aggro deck in Standard. Moving on. Ava Brook Caretaker. 4 generic, 2 green. Human Werewolf. Hexproof. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control. And then the Nightbound. Werewolf, Hexproof. Other permanents you control have Hexproof. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Wow. Okay. This is absolutely a 10.0 in limited. I mean, this card is completely ridiculous. If this card hits the table, if you can't counter this or rip this card out of your opponent's hand with a hand hate spell, this card is going to be an absurd problem every single time. What's up, dude? Nice to see you, Zach. How's it going, man? But this card is absolutely ridiculous. Hexproof is just kind of a nonsense mechanic, especially in limited. It's not the best mechanic for gameplay. Just not being able to interact with things kind of sucks. And it's especially annoying that the player that plays this card is still allowed to interact with it because it has hexproof and not shroud. But yeah, no kidding. I think a lot of people want this in their sealed pool. The only saving grace for this card is that the turn it comes down, it can't put +1/+1 counters on itself, which is nice. So there will be spots where maybe you're able to keep all your opponent's other creatures off the table if you are playing a mid-rangey control deck. And so they just play this as a 4/4 and don't get the counter synergy out of it. But my God, I mean, this card is going to completely take over so many games. And that's just the front side. Like, the front side is like whatever. The front side is really good, but the back side is completely broken. All permanents you control having hexproof is just absolutely ridiculous. And then at the beginning of combat, putting 2 counters on every single creature. I mean, the Nightbound side of this card is just so broken, man. The only saving grace is that this takes a minute to actually set up to get it to Nightbound. Hopefully, you know, if you're not the person playing this card, you're able to cast a spell the turn after it comes down, so your opponent would have to pass on turn 7 or whenever to actually flip this over, and then maybe you can set up a double spell to, again, flip it back and just not let them set up the Nightbound to this. But this card is ridiculous. I mean, if this gets going, good luck. Good luck beating this. But I'm going to give this a 10.0. I think this card is absolutely ridiculous. It's going to steal a lot of matches in limited, no question. It will make me very happy to be a blue mage in this format and play counter spells, because that is also some saving grace to this card, is that it can be countered. But the card's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if you don't counter it, if you don't rip it out of their hand, it's just an incredible card in play. So 10.0 in limited. This is right up there with Sorin. I don't know which one I personally like better. I think I like Sorin very slightly better, but it's very close. Sorin is cheaper, provides a card advantage, which I always like, and making lifelink flyers is like a really big deal. I could easily see Sorin outpacing a card like this if they played straight up, because, you know, Sorin can come down, make a lifelinker plus for a card, minus make another lifelinker, and then plus for cards, and then you could maybe outrace a card like this with 2/2/3 lifelinkers. But I have no idea. I could end up being wrong with that. These cards are both incredible. Those are my only 10.0s so far. And as far as constructed goes with this card, yeah, I mean, it's a little slow at 6 mana for what the format is doing, but this is a very good ramp payoff right here. And we definitely, after this set, we're going to have enough like werewolf and wolf things going on where we might be able to make a legitimate werewolf deck in standard. And we might be able to play things like the Celestis to ramp into these cards, and then we can manually flip from night and day whenever we want with the Celestis' ability. So this card interests me a lot in constructed. I'm going to give it an 8.0. I think it has a ton of potential. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being sweet. It's really just going to come down to can there be a good ramp deck in this format. The toughness is 4, Zyphon. The toughness is 4. It is a 4/4. Oh, sorry, you guys. My bad. I should have ticked that down a little bit. Yeah, the toughness is 4. It's a 4/4. But yeah, I mean, this card is really, really strong. I think it has a lot of potential in constructed, and I think it is downright degenerate in limited. So if you're going to first pick this card every time you see this, I can't imagine really ever passing this in pack 1. Even in pack 2, I would maybe abandon whatever my second color was and try going into green for this card. This card is just completely ridiculous. But that's my rating for that card right there. Nuts. Ava Brook Caretaker. prepare to lose to that one in Limited. All right, Bramble Armor. 1 generic green artifact equipment. When Bramble Armor enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +2/+1, equip 4. This card's very medium. I mean, the ETB in equip is cool. +2/+1 is like fine, and then that equip cost is very high. I'm going to give it like a 5.5. Maybe, that's probably a little high. I'm going to go to 5.0. I think it's a very generic common. You will play it some of the time, but most of the time you'll have better things to be doing. I just think the 4 mana equip is pretty garbage. It's just a ton of mana for a pretty medium buff. And the only like nice thing is when it enters, it attaches. So it's like okay in like the mid game when you can throw it on a thing, especially if you have flyers. If you're like green white or green blue, throwing this on a flyer is kind of cool. But other than that, I don't think it's very good. So I'm just going to give it a 5.0. Very middle of the road common. Not something I'm excited to play at all. Something I could see myself playing occasionally, but will be very fine with cutting this card. As far as constructed playability, I'm going to just give this a 0. Don't play this. Don't you dare play this. This card is horrendous. Just don't do it. Just don't do it in constructed. All right, next card here, Bramble Worm. Creature, worm, reach, trample. When Bramble Worm enters the battlefield, you gain 5. And then you can pay a green and 2 generic exile Bramble Worm from your graveyard. You gain 5 life. Just a very solid green uncommon. I'm going to give this actually I'm going to give this an 8.0, and the reason I'm going to punch it a little bit above a 7.5 is because of the fact that it can just gain 5 in your graveyard. I am certain that green in this format is still going to use the graveyard fairly regularly. I mean, that's kind of what green does, especially in the Innistrad blocks. Really likes to fill its graveyard up and do things out of the graveyard. So not only is this just going to be a wonderful 7-drop for you, a reach trampling 7/6 for 7 mana, very solid. It's a splashable card because it's only 1 green. But the fact that it can just sit in your graveyard and be a gain 5, I mean, a gain 5 is not incredible in Limited, but it's certainly nice to have access to, especially if you're filling up that graveyard. So I'm going to give this an 8.0. This is a card I would take above most things. I think it's a very strong card. If you're able to put this card into play and get the gain 5 off it, then obviously if it ever dies, you're going to gain another 5. So it's going to gain you 10 life, which is very, very relevant. Gaining 50% of your starting life total on one card is pretty legitimate, especially when it's a solid card that you would play anyway. So yeah, I like this card a lot in Limited. I'm going to give it an 8.0. I think it is really sick. As far as constructed playability, I'll give it like a 3. The only reason I'm going to give it a 3 is if you're like playing a constructed deck that fills up its graveyard and can maybe reanimate this card pretty quickly, then it could be kind of cool. There are probably better things to be reanimating, but you know, it has some synergy in that graveyard. So I'll be generous with this card and give it like a 3.0 and say maybe it's playable in something. But where this card is definitely going to shine is Limited. I think it is going to be a very top-tier uncommon in the format, and especially a top-tier uncommon in green. Let's go over to Cartographers Survey. 3 generic green sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Put up to 2 land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, this card is interesting. It's kind of like an explosive vegetation, but it's a little awkward because the lands have to be in the top 7. But I could easily see there being like a big, hey, Dave Palmer, thanks for liking the stream, dude. Appreciate that. Appreciate you very much. If you're just tuning into the stream, I already kind of explained to people, I'm finishing up the Crimson Vow set review right now because I was a little bit off about when Crimson Vow is actually releasing on Arena. They're going to be doing maintenance here shortly, and maintenance should take an hour or 2, hopefully if we're lucky, and then Crimson Vow will drop on Arena. So I was a little overzealous on what time it was going to start. Anyway, I think this card will be okay in limited. I wouldn't take this super high, but I'm going to give it like a 5.5 because it could lead to some really sick big mana strategies. And it's also cool that it can hit any 2 lands. It doesn't have to hit basics, which is kind of neat. So if you have a deck that wants mana, that wants to curve from 4 to, say, 7 for cards like Bramble, then you'll be fine with playing a copy of Cartographers Survey. There will be plenty of big green idiots to play, plenty of big, whatever creatures to play, whatever colors you're doing. There will be bombs that you could try and make work with this. So I'm going to give it a 5.5. It's not a card you're going to play super often because the only decks that are going to want it are typically going to be the green big mana decks. But when you do want it, this card will be a really key player in your deck. So I think it'll be a solid uncommon. You're not going to take it super highly, especially in like the middle of the draft, late in the draft. But if you see one of these early, this is a very interesting card to take and try building a more kind of top-heavy green deck. So card's fine in limited. As far as constructed goes, I'm actually going to give it like a 5.5 there too. I could, again, if there's a ramp deck in standard, this will be a player, and the fact that it can hit dual lands is awesome. You can just play this, hit 2 duals. It does some cool stuff. It does some really cool stuff. So we'll see how it works. I would love to see this card be playable in standard. We haven't seen a true ramp deck in a minute, so seeing cards like this in the format is nice. And who knows, maybe we'll see like a cool green ramp deck in standard emerge. On to the next card here, Cemetery Prowler, 1 generic, 2 green, creature, wolf, vigilance, 3/4. Whenever Cemetery Prowler enters the battlefield or attacks, exile a card from a graveyard. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card type they share with cards exiled with Cemetery Prowler. This is another, it's a good rare, or a good mythic rare, but it's not going to completely win games on its own, but it's just a solid card. A 3-mana 3/4 with Vigilance is a very solid rate. Very good rate. And the ability on it is kind of just gravy. I think I would give this card a 7.5. It's close to an 8.0, but I'm going to give it a 7.5. It's another card that I'm not sure I would take over like a Hero's Downfall or the red deal 5 or just like good removal. But it is a very strong card. I think it's like very slightly better than the 1-mana wolf we talked about earlier, but it's close. I mean, the wolf can obviously scale and get bigger than this. So it is a close call there, and the wolf obviously is very good on the play in any sort of aggressive deck, whereas this is kind of just a mid-rangey good creature. But nonetheless, the ability on this is very relevant because there are going to be plenty of disturb things to hit, and if you are hitting disturb things, you're not letting your opponent obviously get value on those, and then you're getting additional value from the exile by making your spells cost 1 less. And then, if you're able to attack and hit other types, you can make your spells cost even less. So it's going to be really good to ramp out powerful threats or just double spell, which is typically very powerful and limited. It's going to be a strong card. I'm going to give it a 7.5. I wouldn't always first pick this card, but I would first pick it out of, a fair amount of packs. And I definitely think it's going to be a top 3 pick in pretty much any pack. It'd be a very strange pack where you do not pick this in the top 3 cards. And as far as constructed play ability, this card's actually like a pretty okay constructed card. I'm going to give this like a 5.0. I could easily see this making some sideboard appearances, especially if graveyards end up mattering a lot. Just a nice card to have access to. So I'm gonna give this a 5.0 in constructed and a 7.5 in limited. Moving on, Cloaked Cadet, 4 generic green, human ranger, training, 2/4. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on 1 or more humans you control, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. This card is awesome. If you're able to attack with this and it doesn't die, drawing a card is insane. But not only is it just good for drawing off its own training ability, it'll be able to draw off of any other trainers you have in your deck, and it will also be able to draw off of any sort of spells you have that put counters on your creatures or any sort of effects that put counters on your creatures. So this card's going to be really, really good in limited. I would give this, I think, an 8.0. I think this is going to be an awesome uncommon. Really, really sick with the training mechanic, and will really just spiral out of control in some games, I think. So I'm pretty excited for a card like this. I would take this card very early, very often. This would be a first pick that I would take in a fair amount of packs. I think this card is going to be very, very sweet. As far as constructed playability, you can actually build around an effect like this. I don't think this card is very good in constructed, but I'll still give it like a 4.5. You know, it's a little bit below playable, but it's, you know, you could build around this and it could do some pretty sweet stuff. It's unfortunate that it only triggers once each turn if you're building around this, but, you know, who knows? Maybe it would be a cool card. I could see, like, in Historic, playing this at the top end of, like, a Winding Constrictor strategy or something. Could be kind of neat. Anyway, on to the next card. Crawling Infestation, 1 green, 2 generic. Enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may mill 2 cards. It's nice that that's a may, so you don't have to deck yourself with this thing. Whenever 1 or more creature cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, during your turn, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. This card seems too slow to me. Maybe it's a really sweet graveyard enabler, but if you're not trying to fill up your graveyard aggressively, I think this card kind of sucks. First of all, you only get an insect if you hit a creature. So if you don't hit a creature, then you're just not getting insects. It only triggers on your turn for the insect, which is a little awkward if you're trying to block with your creatures. So I think this card's kind of weak. I'd give this like a 4.0 in limited. I could see it doing some work. There will be a very, very niche amount of decks that will want to play this card. But if you're really not going for that hyper-aggressive fuel the graveyard strategy, you don't want to play this card. There will be very few amount of decks that will be able to pay this effect off. So I'm going to give it a 4.0. Typically, this card's going to be going around the table pretty late. And as far as constructed playability, it's probably about as playable in constructed as it is in limited, maybe slightly higher because at least you can build around this in constructed. So I'll actually give it a 4.5 in constructed. I still don't think it's going to be playable, but at least this kind of effect, you can build around this. You can try and abuse this a little bit. So it might be a little more interesting there. On to the next card. Reprint here. Crushing Canopy, 2 generic green, instant. Choose 1, destroy target creature with flying, or destroy target enchantment. Just a clean common to have access to. Very good sideboard card if you're playing best of 3. And honestly, with where this format's going to end up, there are a lot of enchantments and there are a lot of flyers. So I can actually see this card being a very reasonable one-of main deck. Honestly, I think it was a pretty okay one-of main deck in Ixalan as well, because a lot of people were like throwing one with the wind on creatures and things of that nature. So Crushing Canopy can do some pretty good work. I would not be surprised at all if this ends up being like a very reasonable one-of in the main deck for green deck. So I'm going to give it a 5.0. I think it's a very reasonable common. You'll take this late mid pack if you're green, and oftentimes you'll throw it in your sideboard. Sometimes you'll start it. And I imagine most of the time starting it, you'll be pretty pleased with this card. So I'm going to give it a 5.0, very generic, middle-of-the-road common. Sometimes you'll play it, sometimes you won't. And as far as constructed playability, it's actually a good card to have access to in constructed as well. So I'll give it a 4.0. It's a fine sideboard option for certain decks, which is nice. It's really cool that this card can kill Smoldering Eggs flipped side, and it obviously can kill Goldspan Dragon. It can do some good stuff in limited. Now, I don't know that it's better than, say, Run Afoul, but you know, it's a fine card. I'm not even sure if Run Afoul is even legal in this standard format. I forget. I think it is, but nonetheless, Crushing Canopy, a good card to have access to. Cultivator Colossus, 4 generic, 3 green, star, plant, beast, trample. Cultivator Colossus's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. When Cultivator Colossus enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you do, draw a card and repeat this process. This card's going to be a really solid mythic in green. I think I'm going to give this card also an 8.0. I think it's about as good as the uncommon worm we looked at. Can a dredge deck use that, Steven? The enchantment that makes insects? It's just so slow for dredge in eternal formats. Maybe a standard dredge deck could emerge. We'll have to see what happens, but I don't think so. It's just so slow, just glacially slow. But we'll see what happens. It could be playable. As far as this Colossus goes, though, I'm going to rate it right about where I put the worm at. A big trampler. It scales with the number of lands you control, which is cool. And I like that if you're playing this card in your deck, once you hit 7 mana, you're probably never going to play lands in your hand again, because as soon as you draw this card, you can play this card, and every land that you've been holding in your hand, you can play and continue to repeat that process and draw cards off those lands. So I kind of like, if you have this card in your deck, sandbagging lands past 7, which is a reasonable thing to do in Limited once you hit that many lands anyway, because a lot of times you're not going to be able to double spell anyway, especially if you're not playing card draw effects. Like every card off the top you're going to be able to play. And typically you're in top deck mode once you hit 7 mana in a lot of decks. So I like once you hit 7, if you know you're playing this card, just sandbag your lands, and as soon as you draw this card, every land that you're sandbagging is going to turn into a new card, and it's going to grow this card, and you're not even really going to get punished for holding them because they're all going to go into play. So every land that you've been sandbagging is going to turn into a card and hit the table, make this bigger. You know, if you draw some spells off those lands you've been holding, that's great, because then you can maybe potentially cast them, because all the lands will be in play untapped. Yeah, I think this card's really good. I like this card. It'll do very good work. If I saw this early, I would take it. The only downside to this card is it's triple green, so you're like heavily cemented into green. It's a little different than the worm in that case. But this card's really good. As far as constructed playability goes, I don't think this is good enough. It's very expensive. I'm going to go 3.0 in constructed. Maybe someone will play it somewhere, but it seems kind of bad to me. So 3.0 constructed, 8.0 limited. Dawn Heart Disciple, 1 generic, 1 green, human warlock, 2/2. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, Dawn Heart Disciple gets +1/+1 until end of turn. This is just a very solid 2-drop. If you have a lot of humans in your deck, it's going to be basically a 2-mana 3/3. I love it. I think it's a very strong 2. Probably a 7.0 too. I mean, this is a 2 that you are going to want in your green decks, especially if you're like green-white humans. Just exactly the kind of card you want to play. 2 mana, 3 power idiot. It's going to be a very good attacker in this format. As far as constructed playability, that could be like okay in a green-white humans deck. I wouldn't advise playing this card. There are better things you can do for 2 mana, but this card's like not completely egregious. I'd give it like a 4.0. I could see this seeing like play in a random humans deck that someone brings to F&M and they just want to play a budget deck. But it's fine. I mean, it's, you know, it's going to attack as a 3/3, sometimes as a 4/4, because you'll be able to double spell, and I assume your deck's going to be all humans if you're playing this. So it can do some good work. Dig Up, 1 green. Search your library for a basic land card. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. And then it also has Cleave for 1 generic, 2 black, and a green. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So it's just a demonic tutor for the Cleave cost. Typically these effects are kind of medium in Limited, but I will say this card's power level scales. Obviously it scales depending if you're green-black versus if you're green something else. But it scales heavily depending on how bomb-heavy your deck is and how many other completely broken cards you find in the draft. If you have a completely unbeatable bomb like Sorin, like the mythic werewolf with hexproof that we were talking about earlier, if you have those cards in your deck, then those are cards that I would want to play Dig Up to find. But if you don't play completely busted cards in your deck, then Dig Up is very medium, even if you're casting it for the Cleave cost. You need a very good reason to spend 4 mana to just basically get 1 card out of your deck and take an entire turn off. But I think it's pretty nuts if you end up having a bomb in your deck, so it's really going to depend on that. As far as just the 1 green search for a basic land card, that's fine. You'll play that, but you're not going to draft that super highly. This is a rare that I think will go middle of the pack, late pack, usually. I'm going to give this like a 5.0. There will be decks that can play this, and there will be some decks that can abuse it beautifully, but most decks are not going to be able to abuse this in a crazy manner, and I think it's a pretty average rare. I would take a lot of commons and uncommons over this card. I'd be fine to pick this card up late or, middle of the pack, but this is not something I'm going to draft early, I don't think. As far as constructed playability, it's pretty interesting in constructed. The front half of it, just dig up, just getting a basic is okay, and then obviously the cleave is like okay as well. They're both just kind of okay. I'll give it a 5.0 in standard. Maybe someone will be able to make this work pretty well, but I think generally it's going to be kind of medium in both limited and constructed. So we'll see what happens with that. Dormant Grove, 3 generic green enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then, if that creature has toughness 6 or greater, transform Dormant Grove. I'll be doing pre-release Friday night at 6 p.m. You want to go? Potentially. Zach, potentially. I'll see if Julia wants to do anything Friday night. I might even ask her if she wants to go try a pre-release, but we'll see. We'll see if I can convince her to do that. The answer is probably no. She's very nervous to come to a Magic event. She's worried that people will not treat her well. She's very, very anxious. But someday, hopefully, I'll be able to get her to come to something. But yeah, I may go to that Friday night. That'd probably be one of the best times for me to go, Friday night or Sunday. Anyway, back to this Dormant Grove. Beginning of combat, putting a +1/+1 target counter on target creature is a pretty okay effect. If you remember Hadana's Climb in that format, that card was pretty nuts, but that card also flipped into a completely ridiculous land. This one flips into a 3/6 Vigilance. Other creatures you control have Vigilance, which is not terrible. A 3/6 Vigilant is pretty good. Other creatures having Vigilance is pretty gas. Every creature just having Vigilance is nice. I'll give this card like a 6.5. I think this card's pretty strong. If you have a deck that is able to kind of just sit there and pay off the +1/+1 counters, if you have a very defensive deck, which a lot of the Toughness Matters cards in green and black seem to be setting up for pretty defensive decks. If you're able to just sit there and get a bunch of counters off this and then flip this into a surprise, another idiot with a ton of toughness, and give everything Vigilance, I mean, that's pretty sick, especially when your creatures have 1,000,000 toughness, so you can probably free roll attacks. Yeah, I like this card. I don't know that I would take it over, some of the other good commons that we've talked about, but maybe I'm underestimating this card. It could have a lot of potential. If you have a very good defensive deck and can pay off this +1/+1 counter theme, or if you have a very aggressive deck, it's also pretty cool with, like, training. So yeah, this card might even be a little higher than a 6.5. It really just depends. I'm not sure how to evaluate it, but I think I think it's a fine card. 6.5 in limited. As far as constructed goes, I would not play a card like this. We'll give it like a 3.0. It's cool that it does the +1/+1 counter thing. Some decks like that, but not super interested in this. Next card, Flourishing Hunter. 4 generic, 2 green, Wolf Spirit, 6/6. When Flourishing Hunter enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to the greatest toughness among other creatures you control. This card's fine. It's a 6-mana 6/6 that has a little bit of text on it. You'll probably typically be gaining like 4 life. I mean, I guess if you're in the Toughness Matters deck, we did see a 113 earlier in black. So if you play this and you have the 113, you're going to look like a genius. Play a 6/6, gain 13 life is an unbelievable rate. So depending on what deck you're in, this effect could be really good. So this is much better than a typical 6-mana 6/6. I'll give it a 7.0. This could end up being a really sick common, especially if you're in the Toughness Matters deck. But if you're not in the Toughness Matters deck, it's kind of whatever. I mean, a 6-mana 6/6 is fine. Nothing you're super excited about, but go on. Thank you for liking the stream, dude. But if, like I said, if you're in that Toughness Matters deck, this could really do some crazy stuff. So I'm going to give it a 7.0. Could be a really good common for that deck. As far as constructed playability, 1.0. This is not a constructed playable card. Don't play this. Yeah, that's about what I've got to say for that. on to the next card here. Glorious Sunrise, 3 generic, 2 green, enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose 1. Creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample until end of turn. Target land gains tap, add 3 green until end of turn. Draw a card if you control a creature with power 3 or greater. You gain 3 life. This card is insane. This card is absolutely nuts. I'm going to give this card a 9.0. I'm going to give this card a 9.0 because the flexibility of this thing is ridiculous. You can ramp to 9 mana on turn 6 if you want. Or 8 mana, sorry, because it adds 3, so you're tapping that mana. So you're only netting 2 mana. So you basically ramp from 5 to 8 on the following turn, which is awesome. The creatures you control getting +1/+1 and gaining trample is awesome. Just literally all the modes on this card are relevant. All of them could be good. My favorite one is the draw card if you control power 3 or greater, but I'm a real glutton for drawing cards, so you know, to each his own. But this is going to be my favorite mode on this card. I would first pick this almost every time. This is going to get a 9.0 in limited for me. It might even be better than that. The only reason I'm going to keep it at a 9.0 is it obviously requires you need some creatures in play for this card to actually do its thing. I mean, even if you don't have creatures, though, you can just sit and gain a bunch of life. But that only goes so far. But if you're able to draw a bunch of cards off this thing is going to be completely out of control. So I'm going to give it a 9.0. Very, very high priority rare here. One of the best cards we've seen in green so far. Insanely good card. I think it is the best rare that we've seen. We've seen some mythics that are a little better, but at rare, this card is crazy good. I would first pick this almost every time, and I think it's going to be very good. In Constructed, it seems okay in Constructed. There might be a deck that can utilize this. Maybe this would be a good sideboard card out of mono green if your opponents aren't able to deal with your things. Just draw a bunch of cards. Gaining life could be good. Again, all the modes are interesting. The mana mode is like probably the worst mode, but even that mode, like if you have 7 drops in your deck, you'll be able to play a 7-drop ahead of curve. So I think this card's just very solid. I'm going to give it like a 6.0 in Constructed. I could easily see this playing Constructed play, and it's an EDH All-Star. I'd imagine this card in EDH is just straight fire. Just being able to draw extra cards every turn is just really nice in a green deck. So adding all these modes in an EDH deck will come up, I'm sure. So I like this card a lot. Very, very sweet card. 6.0 Constructed, 9.0 limited. You're going to want to play this card if you see it. Hamlet Vanguard, 2 generic, green, 1/1, human warrior, ward 2. Hamlet Vanguard enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it for each other non-token human you controlled. Okay, this card seems pretty sick. If you have a lot of humans, this is going to be like a 3-mana 7/7 some of the time. I mean, this card is crazy. This is not a card you're ever going to want to play on turn 3, more than likely. The only time you're going to play this on turn 3 is if you go 1-drop human, 2-drop human, and then play this as a 3-mana 5/5, which, by the way, will probably be something people do in Constructed. I think this will be a pretty Constructed playable card, too, especially because it has Ward 2, very hard to interact with. This card's great. I'm gonna give this card, like, honestly, I'm going to rate it right where I put Glorious Sunrise. If you get the human payoffs for this card, if this is like a 3-mana 7/7 with Ward 2, which isn't that crazy to imagine setting up because of all the humans in white-green, I'm gonna give this card a 9.0 as well. This card is crazy. I would first pick this card as well almost every time, and I would really try just drafting a ton of humans and just try playing this as like a 3-mana 7/7, 3-mana 9/9. I mean, this card is awesome. So 9.0 in limited. I'm actually going to give this like an 8.5 in Constructed. I feel like this could be a historic human player right here. I mean, this is going to be a 3-mana 5/5 every time in historic humans, right? And it'll be very reasonable to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-mana 5/5, and a 3-mana 5/5 in the aggressive human decks is really, really good. It's very hard to clean up with sweepers. You can even put additional counters on this with Aspirant, with Thalia's Lieutenant. So I think this card is insane. I think this might be one of the most constructed relevant cards we've seen yet, other than like Sorin, which I'm just really hype about that card. And obviously the white vampire, the welcoming vampire, I thought was really good. But this card has a lot of potential. Watch out for this one. This could be really good in Standard. I expect it to be a player in Historic now. I think this card is sick. And the Ward 2 is just gravy. I really like this card a lot. So I'm going to give it 9.0 limited and 8.5 constructed. And yes, Xiphon, exactly. The dream curve with this is on the play, turn 1 Esper Sentinel, turn 2 Thalia, turn 3 this. And you'll just annihilate your opponent. You'll start smashing them. So yeah, I'm excited for this. This card looks really, really good. On to Hive Heart Shaman, one of Zach Allen's favorite cards right here, Apiary Dream. 3 generic, 1 green, human shaman. Whenever Hive Heart Shaman attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card that doesn't share a land type with a land you control. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. 6 mana, create a 1/1 green insect creature token, put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Activate only as a sorcery. Yeah, I mean, this is going to be pretty good in limited. Mana sinks are typically nice in limited. It's got a pretty good body, 3/5 for 4 mana. Yet again, we see that toughness matters theme. Yeah, it does look sweet, Dwight. I agree. But the only thing that I wish it did is I wish when it entered, you could get a basic land type, but that's okay. I mean, attacking with a 3/5, especially if you're on the play, there'll be a lot of times where you can free roll an attack with this and go get your second color. Maybe you'll be playing a third color with this card, who knows. You have to get basics that don't share a land type, so you're definitely going to want to play 2 or 3 colors if you're playing this card. Typically in limited, you're always playing at least 2 anyway. But getting a land is sick on that first attack, and then the activated ability is nice. The activated ability is very, very nice. The real question, do you play an off-basic type to search up? You might. You definitely might if you have this in your deck. I could buy that. And it kind of just makes a free roll to splash a good card in another color, too, which is kind of cool. Not completely free, obviously, but it would tempt you into doing that more, which is totally fine. But the activated ability here is insane and limited. I mean, creating a 1/1, you can do this every turn, basically, and then you're probably going to be putting 2 counters on it if you're playing that third off-color basic that we're talking about here. So you're just like 6 mana making 3/3s. I mean, that's pretty gas. That's very, very good. This card's, like I said, a lot of toughness, so it's going to be good at holding down the fort. It's going to be hard to remove this. Yeah, I like this card a lot. I'm going to give this... I don't think I like it as much as I like Hamlet Vanguard and Glorious Sunrise, although it's close. I'm going to give it an 8.5. I think it's just slightly below those rares personally, but this card is very, very good. And I could be misevaluating the other 2. Maybe this card's right there with him, but I'm going to give it an 8.5. I think it's very good. I think I would take the other 2 over him, but it is very close. 6 mana is still a pretty hefty investment to make 3/3s. You won't be able to do that like every turn of the game, probably. You probably have to do some other stuff. But it's a very solid card nonetheless. 8.5. You will first pick this card over most things, and it's definitely going to be a key player in any green deck. As far as constructed playability, it seems pretty medium in constructed, but we'll give it like a 4.5. It's a cool card. It can do some sweet stuff. It can ramp you. It can make some things, but you probably have better things to do in constructed than play this, like play an Asika's Chariot, for example, or a Sorin. But nonetheless, it's a fine card. A very good card in limited, and a fine card in constructed. On to Hook Hand Mariner, 3 generic green human werewolf, daybound, 4/4. Nightbound, 6/4. Rip Hook Raider, can't be blocked by creatures of power 2 or less. This is a werewolf I can get behind because at least the front half of this is stomachable. I mean, some of those red ones just look like straight garbage, which is frustrating because their templating looks a lot like the templating on the werewolves from the last set, which annoys me. You're not even going to get a very different play experience out of those cards than we got from Tin Street Ruffian and I forget what the 3-mana 3/2 Trample was, but the Menacer reminds me a lot of that. So, but this is a reasonable werewolf. A 4-mana 4/4 is a card I would play in most decks all on its own, and then it just flips into a very solid 6/4 that has the old can't be blocked with power 2 or less clause on it, which is good. So I think this card's sweet. This is definitely better than middle of the road common. I think I would give it like a 6.0 because a 4-mana 4/4 is typically okay in limited, but the backside makes it considerably better than just the vanilla 4/4 that you would get usually. So I'm going to give it a 6.0. I think this will make the cut in almost every green deck, and it'll be a 4-drop that you're fine with playing. As far as constructed goes, don't play this. 1.0. 1.0. Not good. Howling Moon. 2 generic green enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target wolf or werewolf you control gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token. If you have a ton of wolves and werewolves, I think this card is fine. +2/+2 is obviously quite good to get on any combat. Most of the wolves and werewolves get very big, and some of them have Trample. So if they have Trample, the +2/+2 is just going to be awesome. How often is your opponent going to cast 2 spells to give you a 2/2? Probably never, if they can help it. So you can kind of just ignore this clause. I guess if they're trying to flip it back to day, though, they have to cast 2 spells. This card's interesting. This card's really interesting. It's going to put your opponent in binds because it's going to make them not necessarily want to switch it from night to day, but they might have to switch it from night to day to beat your werewolves. So it's kind of a yeah, it does, exactly. It's kind of a cool card. I don't think I would take this super highly. I'm going to give it I'll give it a 7.0. It's not a rare that I think I would first pick by any means, although it is an interesting build around. But I think I'd rather take a lot of the good uncommons, some of the really good commons that we've talked about over this card. But it's an interesting card. I could be misevaluating it. It might be better than I think. But I typically, cards like this, it just kind of makes your big idiots bigger, which is fine, but it's not always going to be great. When you play this card, you kind of have to take a turn off if you don't have creatures in play already. And then, is your opponent going to have to give you 2/2s? That's all a big question mark to me. Typically, giving your opponent options is not the best thing in the world, so I don't know if I love it, but I will give it a 7.0. I think it definitely has potential. It could prove me wrong, and 7.0 is still a pretty good rating anyway. As far as constructed playability, it's probably going to be better in constructed than it is in limited, because you can just make an entire deck of wolves and werewolves to always get this payoff. And there are now enough playable werewolves, I think, in standard where punishing your opponent from flipping it to night and day could be kind of sweet. I'll give this card like a 7.5 in standard. Maybe it's playable, maybe it's a bulk rare, but I think it at least has pretty good potential. So I'll give it a 7.5. We'll see what happens. 4 of those could get nasty. Yeah, it definitely could get nasty. You're not wrong. I imagine your opponent would never cast 2 spells on their turn anymore. Ever. I will say, though, it does say their second spell each turn. So even if they cast 2 spells on your turn, they make 2/2s, which is different than how Day-Night works, because Day-Night only flips if a player casts 2 spells on their turn, which is kind of interesting. I missed that when reading this initially, so that's kind of cool. Could be relevant and could get people the first few times they play against this as well. Howl Pack Piper, 3 generic green. This spell can't be countered. Human werewolf, 2/2. Green generic, tap. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield. If it's a wolf or werewolf, untap Howlpack Piper, activate only as a sorcery, and day bound. Whenever this creature enters the battlefield or transforms into Wild Song Howler, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. All right. I like this card a lot. This is just like a way better Elvish Piper for the most part, which is sick. And yes, it is potentially a cube card. Yeah, I like this card. The can't be countered is probably not hugely relevant and limited, but it will come up. Um, cheating big creatures into play is straight fire in green. Paying 2 mana to put like 7 drops into play is nonsense, which is what this card is going to try and do. And I also like that if you just pass turn and just activate this ability and then pass turn, you get to transform it as well. So it plays really well with itself, flipping from day to night. And then its night trigger is straight fire. Getting to look at the top 6 and put a creature from among them into your hand is great, which feeds the front half. So this card just plays really, really well. Very cool card. I'm going to give this card like an 8.0. I think this card is excellent. If you get big creatures to put into play, this is exactly the card you're going to want in your deck. The can't be countered is some nice gravy on it. And it's going to potentially provide you with a ton of advantage if you're able to flip it to the Howler, or if you just play it as Howler on the night side, it triggers as well. This is a good card. I like this card a lot. Very, very sweet rare in green. If you have big things to put into play, the bigger the better with this card. But yeah, I mean, like you said, Zach, in Cube, this is just going to put Eldrazi Titans into play, which is disgusting. So it's a really neat card for sure. Nothing wrong with this. Yeah, I like it a lot. Gonna get an 8.0 from me in limited, and that might even be slightly lower than it should be. The only reason I'm going to give it an 8.0 as opposed to an 8.5 is it is quite fragile. 2 toughness dies to a lot of things. It's not a very good blocker, not a very good... it will never be attacking on this side very often. On the second side, it's a fine attacker, a 4-mana 4/4, but you're playing this to get the cheat effect and to get the flip on this. So 8.0, very good rare. You're going to first pick this over most things, and you're going to be very happy to play this in pretty much any deck. And as far as constructed playability, it's a really cool thing to have available. I don't think it's very good, but, we saw like a Hoof There It Is deck at one point in time in Standard, so if we get some kind of crazy like Crater Hoof effect or just some huge creature that we want to cheat in, it could be good, especially if there's not a lot of removal running around. Now, Standard right now has a ton of removal spells going on, so I don't think it's great in Standard by any means, but it's an interesting card to have access to nonetheless. I'll give it like a 5.0. I could see it being sweet in some deck at some point, but right now, probably not going to do anything. Infestation Expert, 4 generic, green, 3/4, human werewolf. Whenever an Infestation Expert enters the battlefield or attacks, create a 1/1 green insect creature token, daybound. And then the night part, 4/5, whenever infested werewolf enters the battlefield or attacks, create 2 1/1 green insect creature tokens. Okay, I can get behind this card. A 5-mana 3/4 plus a 1/1 is an okay rate. You would play that in most decks anyway. Is it better than Magus of the Order? Put it onto battlefield, then shuffle. It's probably not better than Magus of the Order, but I would put it on par with Magus of the Order, Zach. As far as Infestation Expert goes, though, 3/4 plus a 1/1 is already an okay rate. You would play that in a fair amount of decks anyway. The fact that you're able to create a 1/1 when this attacks and create 2 1/1s when this attacks or 2 1/1s when this enters, if you play this on the night half, this rate is crazy. A 4/5 plus 2 1/1s, you'd play that every single day of the week in like every color in every deck. That's just a great card in Limited. This card's pretty good, though. I'm going to give it like a 7 point... I'll give it a 7.0. I'm not quite willing to give it a 7.5. I still don't know that a card like this is better than a premium uncommon removal spell, but it's a very solid card. You'd be happy to play this in like any of your green decks, and if you're able to flip this and get even just like if you're able to get 1 free attack out of it and then a second like suicide attack or trade attack, this card is sick. You just get so many bodies off it that it's really cool. But I don't hate this card at all. I'm going to give it a 7.0, solid uncommon. You're not going to first pick it every time, but you would first pick it occasionally. And As far as constructed playability, don't play it. 1.0, not good. Not good. You can do a lot of better things than this. But 7.0 in limited, it will be a solid uncommon. Laid to Rest, 3 generic green enchantment. Whenever a human you control dies, draw a card. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you gain 2 life. This is very, very good with the training mechanic. 4 mana is a lot of mana, though. It does trigger off of every creature separately. It doesn't only trigger once per turn, which is nice. We've seen a lot of that clause on cards in this format. So I like that they left that off. I'll give this like a 5.5. If you're able to pay this off, it's going to be sick. Spending 4 mana to take a turn off to play this is a little awkward, but both of the triggers on this are pretty relevant. So if your opponent's in a spot where they have to trade off with your creatures, you're going to be able to get really good advantage off this. The question is, will you be able to put your opponent in a spot where they have to kill your things? That will remain to be seen. But for now, I'll bump it up to a 6.0. This should be a 6.0. We'll give it a 6.0. I think it's a little better than a 5.5. I'm not willing to go up too much higher than a 6.0, though, just because it needs a lot of things to work around it to be good, and it also needs your opponent to be in a position where they have to make blocks and kill your things to make it do anything. So we'll see how this card plays out. I would certainly be willing to take it fairly early in like my very first drafts of the format just to see how it plays, but it's an interesting card nonetheless. As far as constructed playability, it's honestly a pretty sick card in constructed because you just play all humans in your deck, drop this card, and then if your opponent plays a sweeper, you just draw a card off of every single human that dies. I like a card that exists like this for sure. How playable is it? I'll give it like a 5.0. It might be a sick sideboard card in something in like historic humans decks or whatever. Could be good in standard humans decks too. We'll see what happens. But for now, 5.0 constructed, 6.0 limited, laid to rest. Massive Might, green. Instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains Trample until end of turn. Yeah, it's a fine trick. I mean, I'm going to give it a 5.0 in limited. This is just solid combat trick. I don't really rate this much higher than most other combat tricks. But giving Trample is nice. I'm glad this isn't just +2/+2. I'm glad that it's not just Giant Growth. It's better than a Giant Growth. +2/+2 and Trample is typically going to be better than +3/+3. So I like this card. 5.0, just a solid combat trick. Something you're going to always have to be thinking about when you're playing against green mages in this format. And as far as constructed playability goes, +2/+2 Trample is actually kind of gas in green-white Magecraft. So I'm actually going to give it a 5.0 in constructed too. I might try, but we might try playing a green-white Magecraft deck in standard. Honestly, red-white Magecraft something I want to think about. Green-white Magecraft. There's a 1-green Trample draw card spell as well, so we've got a lot of Trample effects in green, which is going to be sick with Clever Luminancer. But yeah, we'll see. We'll kind of see where that goes. But I do want to screw around more with Magecraft for sure on stream. Have you done the set review for 2 streams now? Yeah, so what I'm doing today, Matt, is just kind of finishing up right now until Crimson Vow releases on Arena, because right now I believe Arena should be doing maintenance, and we can actually check on that right now. Yeah, maintenance, okay, they'll be in maintenance within a minute, and then we're going to just be kind of waiting for the set to drop, and as soon as the set drops, I'm just going to stop doing my set review and wrap it up, and I'll be doing a Google Doc of all my ratings and putting that probably both in the Discord, the team Discord, as well as putting it on the team website. So anybody who wants to look at it on the team website may, or look at it in the Discord may. Vow is up if you restart. Oh, really? Sick. Well, I guess we're dropping the set review, huh? Okay. Let's see here. Yes, I would. Please make changes to my device. I beg of you. I'm scared about this extension. That's fair. That is fair. All right, what is this? Do I have to do this for Arena? Sure. Whatever. Do what you gotta do. Do whatever you gotta do, Arena. Please. It is time to play. It is time to game. We're gonna be some Crimson Vow gamers. Good look for reminding me there that it just came up. Thanks a lot. I thought we were gonna have to wait longer than that. That's awesome. And so if you were interested in the set review, I will continue my set review. Okay, setup, successful, close this. I will probably not be doing any more video of the set review with me talking about it, but I am going to do a Google Doc, so if you want to check that out, you can head over to swishgaming.com within the next few days. I'll have that up, or you could be in the Swish Discord and check it out there. But it's time to game. We are hopping in a sealed immediate. I hate my internet connection so bad. That is fair. Please restart for this to function correctly, huh? All right. I'll restart. That's fine. Okay, it might just be Twitch because mine doesn't render either. 360p and still lagging. Okay. I'm sorry to hear you're lagging. Lagging sucks. I know plenty about lagging, and on my laptop I used to not even be able to play Arena and like talk with people in a Discord. I couldn't even be in a hangout with people and play Magic at the same time. It was pretty annoying. Could only watch other people play. Oh yeah, so close, so close. So close. We're almost there, folks. We are almost there. It is time to Crimson Vow. I think we are going to hop in a sealed event immediately. That is what I want to do first. And then we'll do some drafting. And then tomorrow we'll probably do some more drafting. And then next week we'll probably start doing some constructed stuff. I'm not going to end up doing the Red Bull standard thing this weekend because I'm busy on Saturday with other commitments that I already made before I was aware of the event. So in an effort to not make Julia furious with me, I'm just not even going to attempt to play that event, and that's fine. Available now. Great. All right. Sealed Crimson Vow. Could also be Dykeman's watching Spike without any issues. That's fair. It could be me. Yeah. Sorry if my connection's not great, you guys. All right, here we go. Sealed time. Yes. Open the packs. Open them up. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. A sunrise? Let's go. Interesting. A Hollowed Haunting. I don't know that we're going to be able to pay that off in sealed, but maybe. Very happy with the sunrise. A dual land is cool, I guess. Journal is interesting. Probably a pretty okay card. The fact that it checks your opponent's creatures is nice too. All right, let's hop into some deck building. Got a pretty dispersed coloration of those rares. All right, here, white. This card's not great. Adamant Will's fine. Okay, Retributions are pretty good. Sanctify, Geist. Okay, we've got some okay white cards, but I'm not thrilled with this white. What card do you want to open? Well, that green rare was a good start. Let's go check out, honestly, the green rare is a card I'd like to play, so let's see how good our green even is. It's looking kind of awful so far. Okay, we've got a few good cards in green. So this is like good, this is good, this is good, this is good. These are okay. Beginning of combat. So these actually work with this if I pump them. Okay, I'm into that. Pup, beginning of combat if you control another wolf. Oh, that's absurd. Okay. Plus O plus 2. It's a fine 2-drop. Ooh, Death Touch. Alright, it's playable. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we've got just barely enough playables in green. I want to open the 6-mana. Yeah, I agree, Matt. I want to open that too. It's not what happened for us, so we're going to have to settle with not that. All right, so all these green cards look pretty okay. What does this one do? As long as you put one or more +1/+1 counters on a creature this turn, has Trample and Lifelink. Good lord. Okay, well this card seems, if we can get any amount of +1/+1 counter synergy, this is disgustingly good. Okay, let's kind of go over to our white again. Did we have any +1/+1 counter synergy at all? I don't think we did. We had no training. Okay, that's a little awkward. Maybe we won't end up playing this then. Okay, how many good exploit things do we have? We have Egg. Egg is really good with exploit. Let's look at these Lancers. Exile creature card from a graveyard. Okay. Rejection. Rejection's a very good card. I like that. Ambush could be an okay trick. Spirit. Just a 3/3 for 2 mana. Geist. I don't hate Geist. Okay, we've got some okay exploits. All right, let's see what I'm kind of liking some of our blue stuff. So let's see. Target player mills that many cards. This card will be fine and sealed, I think. How does our black look? Okay, this is really good with exploit. Undying Malice, not terrible. More good things with exploit. More cards with exploit. Okay. Farmer. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I wonder, is green... Is green just, like, not good here? Is green a trap? What happens if I go into, like, a black-blue exploit deck? Maybe we splash green? But what happens if we do that? One Geo update, see you in 30 minutes. Fair. Alright, so let's put Downfall in here. Let's put this in here. I like the draw too. I'm into that. This card's like fine. Creates blood. Another exploit. The 113 doesn't seem good here. Oh, okay. This is pretty good with blood. So maybe we do play these then. Play at least one of these. I don't know that I want to play two, but I definitely like one. I don't know. Maybe I will play two. It's so good with all the exploit. These seem okay, especially if I have two of these. Doom Descender is pretty good. This will be like fine with all the exploit, I suppose. Courier Bat is a solid card. These are good with Courier Bat specifically. This card's like okay. Alright, so target instant or sorcery card, not terrible. I am going to want to play this for a 2-drop, I think. Question is, how good are the zombie horses going to be in this deck? I guess they have a lot of exploits. They might be kind of sick. Still not smooth. Still not smooth. What do you mean by not smooth? My connection? I don't know, maybe we can make this card good? We'll try it out. Alright, so Socialite is easily the weakest card. It does make blood for this guy, but maybe this guy's just not worth playing. So I'm not really going to have much blood. I guess I get a blood from this. That's literally the only card where I'm going to get a blood. If I don't play these. And I'm probably never going to sack the blood to this attack, so it's just a 4-mana 3/3. Yeah, this card's probably garbage. Should definitely be a 3-drop that gets cut here. Maybe it's just this. This card is kind of the most medium, has the least synergy with what I'm doing. Yeah, I kind of don't hate this. I could see playing 16 lands in this deck, just because we have a fair amount of card draw. Oh wow, you're seeing me just open the rares? That's really, really strange. Very, very strange. Okay. You still getting the hiccups? Or getting the... Okay. I'll go ahead and try restarting